The church was nearly empty when the last of the floral arrangements were removed. I stood beside the urn containing Luca's ashes, numb to the prayers still echoing in the sanctuary. My husband was gone. Just 32 years old, an aneurysm had taken him in his sleep, quick, silent, cruel. We had been married only 4 years. I barely had time to grieve when my father called. "We need to talk, Evelyn," he said the morning after the funeral. "It's important. Your mother and Angela will be there too." I agreed to meet them at their house, the one I grew up in, now shadowed by the same emotional coldness that had followed me since childhood. I arrived on time. The mood was solemn, not because of grief, but calculation. Dad sat at the kitchen table reading glasses perched low. My mom fidgeted with a napkin. Angela, my older sister, pristine, in a beige pantsuit, held a folder labeled Transition Plan. "You're still so young," my mother began gently. "You shouldn't have to deal with all this complicated legal stuff on your own." "Exactly," Angela chimed in. "It's best if we help you through this. You've never been great with paperwork." I tilted my head. "What paperwork specifically?" My father cleared his throat. "Luca didn't have a will, did he? It'll be messy. The apartment, his accounts, the firm. It's too much for one person," Angela added. "We thought it'd be best if you stayed here for a while. We'll help sort things, but first you'll need to sign over some temporary authority so we can act on your behalf." She slid the folder across the table. The pen was already uncapped. I didn't touch it. Instead, I smiled. Not the polite kind, but the type that comes from watching a magician forget you know the trick. "That's thoughtful," I said calmly, "but unnecessary. I've already taken care of everything." A pause. Their faces shifted, not quite panic, but confusion with a hint of offense. "You don't need to worry about the apartment," I continued, "or the accounts, or the business. And no, I won't be staying here." Angela blinked. "Evelyn, you're not thinking clearly. You're overwhelmed." "I'm fine," I replied. "Luca and I planned for a lot of things, including this." My father narrowed his eyes. "What exactly did he leave you?" "Enough," I said simply, rising from the table. "And more importantly, he left it in my name." I walked out without waiting for their response. They thought I was fragile, heartbroken, directionless. But they didn't know about the second house in Spain. And I was very, very glad I'd kept that to myself. I was born Evelyn Harper, the second daughter in a household that made it clear from the beginning that second place was a permanent position. My sister Angela, 3 years older, had always been the golden child. Straight A's, business school internships with impressive names, a LinkedIn profile that read like a press release. My parents adored her ambition. They called her driven, focused, a born leader. Meanwhile, I was creative, which was their polite way of saying I was impractical. I wanted to study interior design, and when I got a scholarship to a top art and design school, they sighed like I had disappointed them by not becoming a surgeon. Still, I worked hard, took freelance projects, survived on instant ramen, and built a modest portfolio. By the time I was 25, I had my own clients, a small but respectable name, and a quiet life in the Brooklyn apartment Luca and I shared. They never really approved of him either. Luca was an architect who left a corporate firm to start his own boutique practice. He designed homes that looked like dreams, clean lines, sunlight space that breathed. He loved details and silence, and coffee at 4 p.m. And he loved me in the quiet, steady way that makes you forget the world ever doubted you. My parents saw him as reckless. Angela called him a romantic with no business sense. And even after our wedding, they rarely invited us to family gatherings. They didn't say it outright, but I knew they thought I had settled for someone like me, unimpressive, unspectacular, forgettable. But we were happy. And more importantly, we were intentional. We didn't post our vacations on social media. We didn't flaunt our savings or our modest success. And when Luca's uncle passed and left him a small inheritance, we made a plan. We bought the apartment in Brooklyn under both our names. And with what was left over, Luca suggested something radical, a property abroad. A home not for investment, not for family, but for us. Just us. I remember the night he showed me the listing. A whitewashed villa outside Valencia, 2 bedrooms, a garden with lemon trees, and a view of the sea. It was everything my childhood home wasn't: warm, open, filled with light. He said, "If I die before you promise me you'll go there, live there, let that be the place you remember me by." I laughed, then called him dramatic. But I said yes. We kept the house a secret even from friends. It wasn't hidden out of shame, but preservation. We'd seen what families did when they smelled opportunity. A few years earlier, my father had invested in a friend's failed real estate project and convinced me to co-sign a loan to build my credit. I ended up paying off $15,000 when the business collapsed. Angela borrowed money once for a bridge investment that was supposed to be repaid in 6 months. It took 3 years and she never thanked me. My mother said that's what family does, and I learned what that really meant. Family takes. Family expects. Family counts your generosity as a duty and your boundaries as betrayal. After Luca died, I knew what was coming. The subtle invasion, the feigned concern, the orchestrated guilt. Angela didn't call to ask how I was coping. She emailed me a spreadsheet outlining how much it would cost to maintain the apartment during probate. My father brought up a friend who could help liquidate assets quickly, and my mother sent me recipes and suggested I distract myself with housework. They saw me as a widow in distress, but I was not that woman. I was grieving, yes, but I was also clear-headed. And beneath the grief, something sharper stirred. Not rage exactly, but recognition. I finally saw them without illusion, and I realized something devastating and liberating. I owed them nothing. Not information, not explanation, not access, especially not to the villa in Spain. That house was my secret sanctuary, the one thing untouched by their expectations, the one gift from Luca that no one could manipulate, and I planned to keep it that way. 3 days after I walked out of my parents' house, Angela emailed me a document titled Asset Streamlining Plan. The subject line read, "Just to simplify things for you." I didn't open it immediately. Instead, I reread Luca's last text message to me, the one he'd sent the night before he died. "Don't forget, mi soul. Everything you need is already in place. Trust your instincts." Angela's email sat there smug in its assumptions. I clicked it open eventually. The document was 32 pages long, complete with bar charts, bullet points, and timelines. It outlined how Evelyn's emotional burden could be eased by letting Angela take temporary management of Luca's architectural firm Contact's real estate assets and residual holdings. At the bottom, there was a section marked Family Priorities. It included budget proposals for my parents' medical bills, refinancing options for their home, and a support contribution from the presumed proceeds of my apartment. Nowhere did it ask if I wanted to sell. Nowhere did it acknowledge that maybe I didn't need help. Angela didn't call to discuss it. She just sent the email and followed up with a short text. "Hope this helps. Signed paperwork would be ideal before Friday." Ideal for whom? That same afternoon, my mother called. "Sweetheart, have you thought about moving back in for a while? The house feels so empty since you left." I bit my tongue. I hadn't lived there in nearly a decade, and even when I did, it never felt like a home. "I'm okay, Mom. Really." Well, she said Angela has some ideas to make everything easier. "We know you're under so much pressure, especially now that Luca's gone, and, well, everything he left behind must be overwhelming." There was a pause. "Besides, you don't want to be alone in that apartment. Maybe it's time to let it go." "You mean sell it? You could stay in your old room for now," she offered. "Your father said he'd help clear it out. We could repaint." I almost laughed. My childhood room had been turned into a storage unit for holiday decorations and broken exercise equipment. "Thanks, Mom. I'll think about it." I hung up and stared at the ceiling. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just listened to the sound of silence. My apartment still filled with Luca's presence, still mine. And that silence told me something they weren't asking. They were informing me. They had decided I couldn't handle it. They were already carving up my life like scavengers at a banquet table. The next day, I received an email from a real estate agent named Barry Klein. "Hi, Evelyn," it began cheerily. "Angela gave me your contact info. I'd love to schedule a walkthrough of the apartment at your earliest convenience. We've already lined up 2 serious buyers, cash offers, quick close. You're going to love this." I hadn't given Angela permission to share my details. I hadn't listed the apartment for sale, and yet Barry was speaking as if it were already done. I didn't reply. Instead, I forwarded the email to a lawyer I had met through one of Luca's old clients. Her name was Marissa Cho. She was 35, sharp-eyed, and quietly lethal. I'd spoken to her once before just after Luca's death to ask about the legal steps I needed to take. "They're going to try to take control," she had said bluntly, "especially if they think you're vulnerable." She was right. I sent her everything: Angela's spreadsheet, Barry's email, even the text from my mother about moving back in. "It's coordinated," Marissa wrote back, "but sloppy. They're assuming you'll fold." She sent me a list of immediate steps: freeze the property records, block any attempts to file for financial guardianship, redirect all firm inquiries to her office. I followed every instruction to the letter. Within 48 hours, Barry Klein called me. "Evelyn, sorry to bother. Just wondering if you got my email." "I did," I said flatly. "And I forwarded it to my attorney. She'll be in touch." He stammered something about just trying to help, then hung up. That evening, Angela called. "What are you doing?" she demanded. "Why would you lawyer up? Because someone is trying to sell my home without my consent." "We were helping," she snapped. "You're not thinking clearly. You're letting grief make you paranoid." "No," I said. "I'm finally thinking very clearly." There was a silence. "Then do you even know what Luca left you? Do you even have the password to his business accounts?" "I do. He didn't have a will." "Yes, he did. You're being dramatic and you're being invasive." I ended the call. 10 minutes later, my father texted me. "We need to have a serious family discussion. You're making mistakes." But I had already begun packing. Not boxes for storage, not boxes for sale. I packed the documents that mattered, the ones Luca had left in a fireproof envelope in his filing cabinet: the deed to the apartment, copies of our joint investments, the key to a house in Spain. Let them think I was naive. Let them plan around my weakness, because soon they were going to see what real strength looked like. I had always known Angela was strategic, but I underestimated her urgency. 2 days after our last phone call, a thick envelope arrived at my door. It was addressed in her tidy corporate handwriting and marked time sensitive. Inside was a printed family agreement draft, along with highlighted sections and sticky notes labeled "Sign Here." The language was slick phrases like temporary fiduciary guidance and asset delegation for family stability, but the intent was clear: hand over control. They were trying to seize the assets before I could understand what I owned. Unfortunately for them, I already knew more than they imagined. When Luca died, he didn't just leave behind grief. He left behind a blueprint. 1 month before his passing, after a minor but jarring health scare, he had called me into his study. "There's a folder in my cabinet," he said, "top drawer marked Paloma. That's where everything is. The name of the street in Spain." I found the folder the night after the funeral. It contained 2 passports, 1 bank statement from a Spanish account, a scanned property deed, and a handwritten note that simply said, "If they push you, push back harder." He knew. Maybe not the exact moves my family would make, but he understood the terrain. I had followed the breadcrumbs, contacted the lawyer he'd used in Madrid, confirmed that the villa outside Valencia had been purchased outright 2 years ago and was titled in my name only. It was legally separated from our U.S. holdings, not tied to any will or trust, and completely off the radar of anyone in my family. I returned to the envelope Angela sent me and read each clause carefully. Tucked between the legal jargon was a clause suggesting that primary residence assets could be liquidated at the discretion of a designated family fiduciary, meaning Angela. A second clause claimed the family had a right to access proportional value of unlisted holdings to satisfy shared obligations. It was an attempted coup disguised as concern. I pulled up the documents from Luca's estate, scanned through the notarized will, and reviewed the list of beneficiaries. Every asset was either in joint ownership or assigned solely to me. Angela and my parents were nowhere. I emailed the entire envelope scanned and annotated to Marissa, my attorney. Her response came within 20 minutes. "They're building a paper trail to challenge you. Do not sign anything. Also, your sister just tried to submit an early claim through Luca's former firm to access potential royalties. We've already blocked it." I stared at the screen. The audacity didn't even shock me anymore. What did was the speed. They weren't just greedy. They were desperate. And desperation makes people sloppy. I started digging. I reached out to a contact I had met at a networking dinner, a quiet accountant who specialized in high net worth estate audits. I gave him Angela's full name, the name of her firm, and the approximate time she had borrowed money from me. Within days, he uncovered something unsettling. Angela's own finances were under review. A failed hedge investment, a quiet reprimand from her firm's compliance department, rumors of personal debt being disguised through offshore channels. She wasn't just trying to secure my assets out of greed, she was trying to cover her own collapse. And she thought I was the easiest mark. I compiled a folder of my own, screenshots called logs, timestamps of each message, every instance where someone in my family had attempted to assert control over my life or property. I included every email Angela sent to third parties regarding my apartment, every call from my father mentioning helpful resources, even my mother's subtle texts asking, "Wouldn't it be easier to just come home?" The tone had always been soft, but the structure was hard-pointed planned. This wasn't about concern. This was about control. They were trying to dismantle my life while wrapping it in the language of love. But I'd lived long enough under that spell to finally see through it. I remembered being 16 and asking my father for help paying for an art workshop. He said no, called it frivolous. 2 months later, he co-signed a new car for Angela. I remembered being 22 and being told not to waste time freelancing when I could work in Angela's office as her assistant. I lasted 3 weeks. I was a shadow in my own family's story, and now, just as I was rebuilding after losing Luca, they saw an opportunity to fold me back in permanently, as someone dependent, someone manageable. I wasn't angry anymore. I was awake. The line between betrayal and blood was now sharp and permanent, and I knew what I had to do. It was time to make arrangements not for them, but for me. I logged into the account connected to the villa. The balance was strong. The management company had kept it immaculate. The photos were updated monthly, fresh lemon trees, clean white walls, the sea visible from every window. I booked a flight, one way. Spain was no longer a secret. It was my escape plan, my rebirth, and no one would follow me there. Luca never liked to talk about death, but he planned for it with the kind of quiet precision that made everything else in our life feel safe. When he bought the villa in Spain, he didn't tell me right away. He waited until the paperwork was finalized, until the contracts were translated, until the keys were in a small brass envelope hidden in his desk drawer. Then one evening, as we were watching the rain slide down the kitchen window, he pulled out a small stack of photos and spread them on the table. "Do you remember that trip we almost took to Valencia?" he asked. I nodded. We'd canceled it when work got busy. "I bought a house there," he said simply. I blinked. "You what?" He smiled. "A place by the sea. 2 bedrooms, lemon trees. It's not fancy, but it's quiet. It's for us." Why, I asked. "Because one day we'll need somewhere that's only ours. No family, no clients, no obligations." He paused, then added, "And if I go first, I want you to have somewhere beautiful to start again." At the time, I teased him for being morbid. He just shrugged and said, "It's not morbid. It's math. Life ends. I just want you to be ahead of the equation." After his death, I found the photos again. The villa was exactly as he described: whitewashed walls, blue shutters, an arched terrace with a view of the sea. The deed was in my name. The utilities were managed through a Spanish agency he'd vetted months earlier. Everything was prepared for my arrival, down to the local woman named Clara, who checked on the property every week. It was the only thing they hadn't tried to touch because they didn't know it existed. As I packed for the trip, I avoided telling anyone. Not friends, not coworkers, not even the neighbors who left casserole dishes at my door. I kept everything quiet as Luca intended. There was power in silence. I booked a direct flight to Madrid, then a connecting train to Valencia. The house keys were in my purse, along with Luca's handwritten instructions. "Call Clara when you land. She'll meet you with fresh bread." The night before I left, I sat on the apartment floor with a cup of tea, surrounded by boxes labeled "Angela's Things" and "Dad's Golf Junk" and "Mom's Kitchenware." They'd each left pieces of their lives in mine, expecting me to keep them safe to store their regrets and souvenirs like I was the family attic. Not anymore. I taped the boxes shut and labeled them for delivery. Each one would be sent to their rightful owner, No explanation, no note, just memories they forgot to take when they left the rooms of my life. That evening, I opened Luca's last letter. I'd been saving it, afraid of the weight it might carry. It was short. Mi Sol, he wrote, if you're reading this, I'm already gone and I hate that. But I know you. You'll try to hold everything together. You'll pretend you're fine. You'll let them talk over you, control the narrative, make you feel small. Don't let them, you are not fragile. You are fire in disguise. Go to the villa. Let the sun remind you who you are. Start again. On your terms. With love, always, L. I read it 3 times, folded it carefully. Then I pulled out my passport, checked in online, and deleted every group chat with my family. In the morning, I took a cab to the airport. I didn't cry when we took off. I didn't look back at the skyline. I just closed my eyes and imagined lemon trees. The villa sat on a quiet road just outside a small fishing village. Clara was waiting for me at the station, holding a sign that said Evelyn in careful handwriting. She was in her 60s with silver hair and the kind of calm that comes from living near the sea. Your husband, she said in accented English. He was very proud of this place, always smiling when he spoke of you. She drove me to the house. It was even more beautiful in person. The walls glowed in the sunlight. Bougainvillea trailed along the front fence. The scent of rosemary and sea salt filled the air. Inside, everything was simple. Clean linens, local pottery, a shelf with a few books Luca had picked out, Spanish poetry, architectural theory, a worn copy of The Little Prince. Clara gave me the keys, showed me how to use the gas stove, and pointed out the grocery store 2 blocks away. You are safe here, she said, then added, free. When she left, I sat on the terrace with a glass of red wine and watched the sun dip into the ocean. The sound of waves echoed against the cliffs. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel like I was bracing for an ambush. I wasn't surrounded by people who saw my grief as weakness or my assets as opportunity. I was just a woman with a broken heart, sitting in the place her husband built as a refuge. And in that stillness, something shifted. Not healing, not yet, but possibility. The kind that comes with space, silence, and sun. The kind Luca had promised. The kind I would now claim. 3 days after arriving in Valencia, I visited a small office near the harbor, where Luca's Spanish attorney, Mateo Ruiz, worked. The space smelled like lemon oil and old books. Mateo was in his late 40s with warm eyes and a quiet efficiency that reminded me of Luca. He had been expecting me. Mrs. Harper, he said, shaking my hand. Luca left detailed instructions. He said if you ever showed up here alone, I was to assume 2 things: he was gone, and someone was trying to take what belonged to you. I smiled, not because it was funny, but because it was accurate. Mateo pulled out a file. This property is in your name exclusively. The utilities are current, taxes prepaid for 5 years. The management company Clara works with has kept everything in excellent order. He paused, then added, there's more. Luca created a secondary trust account through our office monthly payments sent from a private dividend fund. As of today, it holds approximately 82,000 euros. It is also yours. I nodded slowly, absorbing the truth. Luca hadn't just given me an escape, he'd given me independence. Mateo continued, he instructed me to give you access once you sign the residency affidavit. If you choose to stay here longer than 90 days, I'll help you begin the local registration process. We can also initiate tax shielding procedures to ensure your U.S. connections don't interfere. I signed every document. Not a single page mentioned my family. They weren't co-signers, weren't beneficiaries, weren't even footnotes. I walked out with a folder of ownership papers, 2 account logins, and a direct line to freedom. That afternoon, I messaged Marissa. Move everything I wrote. Transfer remaining U.S. assets into the revocable trust we discussed. Remove all access from prior emergency contacts. Lock down the apartment, finalize delivery of personal items to my family, and redirect mail to your office. She replied in less than an hour. Done. Also, Angela tried to access your tax history via a shared bank login. The attempt was flagged. We're tracing the IP. I leaned back in the wooden chair on my terrace and stared at the Mediterranean. They had tried to sell my life out from under me. They assumed I wouldn't know how to fight back. They thought I was alone, fragile, overwhelmed. But the truth was, they had been fighting a version of me that no longer existed. The real me, the one Luca knew, the one who had grown from years of quiet condescension and unacknowledged contributions, was not a victim. I was a strategist. I spent the next 2 days finishing my preparations. I arranged for the final set of boxes to be delivered to my father's house. His old book's broken golf trophies, a mug that read "World's Okayest Dad." Angela received a single envelope with a photocopy of my property deed and a note that read, "For your spreadsheet." I didn't write anything to my mother. I knew she'd understand in the quiet corners of her guilt. On the 5th day, I received a video call request from Clara. "There's a letter for you," she said, holding up a cream-colored envelope. It was hand-delivered by a courier. I asked her to open it. Inside was a note from Matteo. One last instruction from Luca. "When she is ready, give her this." Clara unfolded the second paper. It was a list of contacts, people in Valencia, tradespeople, writers, small business owners. At the bottom, "If you want to create, these are your people." Luca had known that I wouldn't just hide. He knew I'd eventually want to build. The next morning, I walked to the village square and visited a tiny gallery that showcased local artists. I introduced myself, showed them a few samples of my design work on my phone, and mentioned I was considering reopening my business remotely. The gallery owner smiled. "We've been waiting for someone like you," she said. That night, as the sea breeze rolled in, I sat with my laptop and drafted the official closure notice for my U.S. company. Not a collapse, just a transition. Evelyn Harper Interiors would now operate from Spain, serving clients internationally focused on minimalist restoration and Mediterranean-inspired spaces. The domain name was updated, the bank accounts rerouted, and a new logo uploaded a lemon branch over calm water. 2 days later, Marissa emailed again. "Angela has stopped responding. Your father left a voicemail suggesting a family intervention. Your mother asked if you were safe. I responded with a copy of your residency letter and proof of your financial solvency. I read the message twice, then deleted it. My safety wasn't their concern, it never had been. They were only afraid because they'd finally lost their grip. And I wasn't coming back. Not to the city, not to the dynamic, not to the lie that family always means love." In my new bank account, I received the first deposit from Luca's dividend fund. I stared at the amount for a while, not because of its size, but because of its intention. It was love in the form of planning, protection in the shape of autonomy, and now I was ready for what came next. 2 weeks later, I returned to New York for precisely 24 hours. Not because I missed it, not because of guilt, but because some things needed to be done in person. Closure is never as clean as the movies make it seem. I flew in, booked a small hotel downtown under a different name, and arranged for the moving truck to arrive at the Brooklyn apartment the following morning. All that remained in the space were the final boxes carefully labeled and packed by my instruction weeks earlier. My parents didn't know I was back. Neither did Angela. But they would soon. At 8:00 a.m., sharp, the moving truck pulled into the street in front of my building. 2 men stepped out, clipboard in hand. "Instructions," one asked. I handed them a printed list. "These go to this address." I pointed to the first column, "and these to this one." I watched as they loaded my father's golf bags, the boxes of dusty books he always claimed he'd reread, and the ugly ceramic cat collection my mother had insisted I keep for tradition. Angela's delivery was smaller, a box of framed degrees she once gave me for safekeeping, and forgot, an empty leather-bound portfolio, and the envelope with her name in embossed silver ink, a final note tied with a ribbon Luca had once used to wrap my birthday gift. I arrived at my parents' house half an hour later. My father opened the door in a bathrobe, confused. "Evelyn," he asked, as if seeing a ghost. "We weren't expecting, I know," I said, stepping inside. My mother peeked around the corner, startled. "Is everything all right?" "That depends," I said. "Are you still trying to liquidate my life?" They exchanged a look. "Sweetheart, we were only trying to help." "Stop," I said, raising my hand. "I'm not here to argue. I'm here to return what belongs to you." I gestured outside. The moving truck was unloading on the curb. The driver carried a box up the front steps and handed it to my father. What is this? Your things, I replied. The items you left in my home. The things I was supposed to keep safe for you even after you tried to sell the roof over my head. We never. You did, I said calmly. You sent agents. You authorized appraisals. Angela drafted false power of attorney documents. You planned everything under the assumption that I wouldn't fight. My mother covered her mouth. My father stepped forward, his voice rising. You're blowing this out of proportion. We thought you needed guidance. You're young, emotional. I'm not young, I said. I'm 28 and a widow, but I'm not helpless. And I'm not yours to manage. Angela arrived 10 minutes later. She wore a crisp suit and heels that clicked aggressively on the walkway. What is going on? She asked, eyeing the truck. Why is my portfolio in a cardboard box? Because that's where it belongs, I said. She narrowed her eyes. You're acting irrationally. No, I said. I'm acting deliberately. And since you all seem so invested in family unity, I've brought some unity of my own. I pulled a manila folder from my bag and handed it to her. These are your emails to Barry Klein, the real estate agent, the one you sent to my apartment behind my back. This is your attempt to access Luca's royalties. This is your spreadsheet detailing how much money you could make if I sold the property. She didn't speak. Marissa, my lawyer, has seen it all. You're lucky I'm not pressing charges for attempted fraud. You wouldn't, she said weakly. I could, I replied. But I won't, because I'm done. This is me ending it. You don't get to call, don't get to ask, don't get to know where I am. I am no longer part of this game. My father sat down heavily on the bench by the door. Where are you going away? I said. Somewhere you can't reach. Somewhere that doesn't see me as a resource to be divided. Angela crossed her arms. So you're cutting us off, I'm freeing myself, I corrected. And you should be grateful. Because the next time you try to commodify someone's grief, they might not be as kind. I turned to leave, then paused at the doorway. One more thing, I said. If Clara from Spain calls to tell you a woman named Evelyn now owns the villa, don't bother booking flights. You're not invited. I walked out into the sunlight, the truck already halfway down the block. The boxes were delivered, signatures obtained. I returned to the hotel, picked up my carry-on, and boarded a cab to the airport. As the plane ascended, I looked down at the city that had both raised and erased me. It didn't matter anymore. The war was over. I hadn't just survived it, I had won. Back in Valencia, the air tasted different. Not because it was foreign, but because it was finally mine. There were no calls, no texts, no guilt-laced messages demanding explanations. I had made sure of it. My phone number was changed, my accounts locked down. Every door they might have used to find me was now sealed shut. The first morning I woke up in the villa, sunlight poured through the shutters like a quiet invitation. I stood barefoot on the cool tile floors, walked to the terrace, and stared out at the horizon. The sea stretched endlessly, whispering promises I hadn't let myself believe until now. This was the life Luca had imagined for me. Not luxury, not escape, just space, just air, just peace. I spent the first week doing nothing but breathing. I let the villa embrace me. I swept its floors, trimmed the vines, and the garden opened windows that hadn't been touched in months. Clara stopped by every few days with bread olives and small updates from the village. You are looking stronger, she said one morning, handing me a basket of lemons, like a woman who has remembered her own name. I smiled. I'm starting to. Each day I walked along the cliffside trail behind the house, letting my thoughts unravel in the wind. I carried a notebook not to write a memoir or novel, but to record the small truths I had ignored for years. Things like grief doesn't always cry out loud. Sometimes it whispers until you forget your own voice. Or family isn't who shares your blood. It's who respects your silence. Or love can exist long after the person is gone, not as pain, but as quiet proof you were once truly seen. By the second week, I visited the local market. Vendors greeted me with polite curiosity, not probing questions. I learned the names of herbs in Spanish, asked about cheeses, pointed to fresh fish. At night, I cooked simple meals and read on the terrace. The sea always there, the constant witness. I found a small design studio for rent on the edge of the village. It was empty, dusty, filled with potential. The owner offered it for next to nothing. Tourists don't want minimalism, he joked. But maybe you'll change their minds. I spent afternoons cleaning the space, sketching layout ideas, mapping how Evelyn Harper Interiors could live again differently. Not chasing clients, not winning awards, just creating beauty that breathed. On the 15th day, a letter arrived from Mateo. Your Spanish residency process has begun. Estimated completion 3 months. Until then, you are considered a guest. But here guests often become family. I pinned it to the fridge. One evening, I lit a candle and pulled out Luca's old shirt, the soft gray one he wore on lazy Sundays. I draped it over the back of the terrace chair just to feel him near. The stars blinked overhead. Somewhere I believed he saw me. Not broken, not shrinking, but rebuilding. I whispered a quiet promise to the night. I would make this life count. I would let go of proving anything to anyone but myself. And I would never again allow love to be measured by obligation, only by presence and truth. It was a quiet Tuesday morning when I received the email. The subject line was simple. Hi from Ava. I opened it slowly, not sure what to expect. Ava was Angela's daughter, my niece 17 years old, sharp like her mother, but softer around the edges. We hadn't spoken in over a year, not since she asked me for help on her college application essay. And Angela shut it down, saying, "Don't burden your aunt, she has enough going on." The message began gently. Dear Aunt Evelyn, I hope this isn't too forward, but I found your email through one of Mom's old messages. I know we haven't been close lately, and maybe you don't want to hear from me, but I needed to reach out. I recently overheard Mom and Grandpa talking. They were upset about you, about something you did. They said you left without warning and cut everyone off. But the way they spoke, it wasn't about missing you. It was about missing your support, your stability, your money. That's when I realized I didn't know who you really were. I only knew the version of you they gave me, the one they described as sweet but a little lost, always kind but not very strong. But that can't be true, can it? I started looking back at the things you did, the ways you helped Mom, the times you showed up without making a scene. I remembered you helping me study for the SATs, sending birthday cards no matter what. I remembered how you spoke at Grandpa's retirement party, calm, clear, kind. You've always been kind. And quiet. But maybe that's where your strength was hiding all along. Mom told me not to contact you. She said it would be disrespectful to the family dynamic. But what if the family dynamic was the problem? I guess what I'm trying to say is I'd like to know you. Really know you. And I want you to know me. If you're open to it, I'd love to visit. Not now, not even soon, if that's too much. But someday. I want to see the person they tried to erase. The person who had the courage to walk away. I'm sorry it took me this long. With love, Ava. I read the message 3 times. Then I sat back and stared out at the sea. The wind carried the scent of salt and rosemary through the open window. I felt something stir in my chest, hope, cautious and unfamiliar. I replied with a short message. Dear Ava, thank you for your honesty and your courage. You're welcome here whenever you're ready. The door is open, always. With love, E. 2 weeks later, she arrived. She wore no makeup, carried a simple backpack, and looked nothing like the curated teenager from holiday photos. She hugged me like she meant it, like someone who wasn't sure if they'd be accepted, but hoped anyway. I made tea. She sat on the terrace, looking out at the view. This place, she whispered. It's like a secret, like a breath I didn't know I needed. It saved me, I said. Or maybe reminded me I didn't need saving. For 3 days we talked. About her school, her fears, her frustrations with her mother. I didn't badmouth Angela. I didn't need to. Truth stood on its own. Ava asked questions about Luca, about my work, about why I left. Because staying would have cost me everything I told her. And I realized I was the only one paying. On the 4th day, she showed me her sketches. They were raw but full of vision. I want to be an architect, she confessed. But Mom says it's not practical. Your dream isn't hers to approve, I said. It's yours to protect. She looked at me, eyes shining. Can I stay for the summer? I nodded. You can stay as long as you need. The weeks passed. We built routines, morning walks to the market, afternoon sketch sessions, evenings on the terrace reading aloud. She asked if I'd ever teach again. I hadn't taught before, but maybe I would. Not in classrooms. In spaces like this. Quiet spaces. Honest ones. Ava began calling me her second home. She wrote her college essay from the guest room overlooking the lemon trees. The opening line read, "My aunt left everything behind and somehow gave me everything I needed." One night as we watched the stars appear, she turned to me. "You think Luca would have liked me? He would have adored you," I said. "And he would have said, 'You're exactly why we built this place.'" Ava smiled. "Then I'm going to help you keep it alive." The next morning, we painted the sign above my small design studio. Two names side by side, Evelyn Harper and Ava Monroe. No titles, no slogans, just a quiet claim, a beginning, a legacy. As we stood beneath it, hands covered in white paint, Ava reached for my hand. "You didn't just walk away," she said. "You created a path for the rest of us to follow." And in that moment, I realized she was right. My story wasn't about loss anymore. It was about light, the kind that spreads even in silence, even after the darkest night, especially then.